You ready?
Yep.
Let's hit it. It's my pleasure to welcome Allan Peiper to the office. What was your highlight of the year? I wonder if we could start our little chat that way.
I think the highlight of the year for me has to be the Olympic gold medal. I mean, you know, the BMC Racing Team's invested a lot of money and time into Greg Van Avermaet in the last 5 years. Stood by him when the press and maybe some of the public was maybe at times doubting whether he could be a winner. And we've seen a progression with him in the last couple of years. Even if he wasn't getting the results, we stood behind him and backed him and had confidence in him and knew that someday it would come through. And this year it all sort of came together. Maybe the stage win in the Tour de France last year where he beat Sagan was the start of that. And coming out at the start of this year and winning Het Nieuwsblad against Sagan again, then winning Tirreno. He started off the year really well, broke his collarbone in Flanders, which in my eyes was possibly the precursor of winning the Olympics, because it took him off the bike for 4 or 5 weeks, which Greg hardly ever does. Build up towards the Tour, won a great stage in the Tour, got confidence out of that, went to the Olympics and put it all together on the day. You know, as much as you say there's luck involved, Nibali crashed, he was pushing it to the limit. But Greg hung on, read the race really well and rode the final perfectly, and I think for me that will stay in my mind as one of the peak moments of my cycling life. You know, seeing one of my riders or someone I've been involved in winning an Olympic gold medal, because the Tour de France is probably the pinnacle for cycling, but if there's anything that would come in second to that, it's got to be an Olympic gold medal. And I remember I was at the Tour of Burgos with the team down there. We just arrived after the final stage back in Madrid at a hotel before we flew home the next day, and we got back in. We'd been watching in the cars on iPhones and trying to keep up there. We just got into the lobby of the hotel, no TV. There were 10 of us around watching on an iPhone, and we see Greg win the bike race. It was absolutely stupendous.
Just give us a little overview about how he is to work with as a person.
Greg's a very unassuming guy, very unassuming. I won't say ego-less, but his ego's very much in place, and he's very appreciative to the people around him, not only to his teammates, but to the directors, to the masseurs, to the mechanics. Has a very high rapport amongst all of the staff because of the way he acts and reacts towards them. He never lashes out. When he's disappointed, he holds it for himself. A really easy guy to work with, and in the sense of the true bike racer, Greg's got to be sort of the affinity of that, I think. You know, some other riders that I would say in the same category, I would class Nicky Terpstra like that as well. A guy who always races, always wants to race, he's always racing.
It's interesting to hear you, after all these years, still be so animated about racing. You know, you can get despondent if you do anything for long enough. But I thought about it last night, knowing that we'd catch up today, and I think of the roll call of people you've worked with over the years, and you've been involved with professional cycling, let's say, can I say it, 40 years? Does that like sound about right?
In and out, yeah, in and out.
You raced with Phil Anderson, you were director sportif of Cadel Evans, you were there for the halcyon time of Mark Cavendish at High Road. Then, you know, we go on to the current crop with Richie Port and Rowan Dennis and these. But you could refer to a whole raft of people. Who stands out above in that long list of name-dropping opportunities?
Yeah, that is a difficult question, and
maybe we could just pull out a few different names and get you to talk about the way that you operate with them.
I think that's a fair question, because to pull somebody out, you know, there's different reasons. Look, you mentioned Cav. if I talk about Cav, you know, the love-hate relationship him and I had, I've never had anyone swear at me over the race radio before, but Cav did. But at the same time, the amount of joy that we got from his wins, you know, and being a part of that, you know, is something that you can't replace, that you knew at the time was going to pass and it would never come back again, because the way he raced and the way he won was exceptional, you know. And you're confronted with another type of person, you know, the Cav that was wild and fiery and you know, firing back and all the rest of it, which confronts you with your own self, you know. I think that's very interesting as well. You know, having worked with Cadell as well on 2 different teams, with Lotto and BMC, I mean, of all the bike riders I've seen, the most meticulous, the most prepared, the most, I might even say the most talented. Right across the board, and got out of his career what he could. You know, our personal relationship wasn't that close, because you can't be close with everybody. You know, then I see a guy like Rowan Dennis, who's been with BMC a couple of years, who you even met with me a few years ago and suggested me to, and I see the relationship there of a lot of similarities of myself with Rowan when I was young as well, which sort of bring back memories, and I see how he acts and reacts and how he races, and his will to win, which really I hold close to my heart as well, because I can see the passion there, you know. So there are different riders in different generations and different times, and of course there's people during your career who are influential, you know. If I can say though, people that were most influential has to be the Plancart family.
Right.
Because I moved in there when I was 17 years old, out in the Flanders fields, nobody spoke English, they had a hand pump in the kitchen, there was no taps, had no bathroom, 2 bedrooms, I had to sleep in the same room as Eddie, or same bed as Eddie even. So as a 17-year-old coming from Australia, that was a whole confrontation with a different way of life. The Plancart brothers, their family had come out of the war years very poor. His father died early. Walter won Tour of Flanders in 76, I moved in 77. Willie had been green jersey winner in 66. Eddie was my age, he'd already been three times Belgian champion in 4 years. So the status of that family and also the hardness of them, I think honed me and honed my skills, and maybe pushed really my limits, because I'm not a tough guy. You know, I'm not the guy down the pub fighting, but they honed that hardness into me of how to be a Flanders bike rider and how you needed to be hard to be successful, you know. And I think those are things that I've taken forwards through my cycling career, also through my professional career after my competitive career, and have steadied me really well, even as generations change.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting to get you to hark back so far. Are those memories of your early career real fresh in your mind still, or does it sort of seem a bit obtuse now, so many years after? You know, even if you consider the images that I have of Allan Peiper as a bike rider, we could consider the cables coming out of the hoods and, you know, different aesthetic that exists in pro cycling now.
I think you, as a director or sporting manager in my position now, you're always reflecting back to compare, and you never want to bring up the past.
As in back in my day.
Back in my day. If I look, I met a guy called Brick Scotter, who many of the punters or viewers or fans don't know, because it was he raced back in the 40s. When I turned pro, he was still part of, you know, the management of Sean Kelly's team that he raced with. And Brick Scotter was a guy who rode to Paris the day before Paris-Roubaix from Belgium, raced Paris-Roubaix the next day and won, and rode with the flowers home to the farm 30 kilometres away after the race. And if I see the hardness of that, because they call him Azza and Brick is the Flemish name, but it means steel brick. And he'd been world champion twice, and those were really hard days. So I'm sure he could reflect back to how hard it was in his day, and I could reflect back to, you know, the difficulties I had when I was young and going to Europe and trying to make a career for yourself, and 40 years later being able to reflect that back on that. And you can't tell the young guys now, well, this is how I did it, toughen up. But at the same time, you've got that experience to sort of rationalise that and give them examples of how they can do it, or what you're expecting of them in this day and age, you know, which makes it really pertinent, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, life deals us lessons, doesn't it? And I think a lot of people like to romanticise about the Anderson and Peiper days when they first went to Europe and they had to find their own way and learn a different language.
They got their first pair of Oakley pilots. I got my first pair from Phil.
But well, go on, take us off on that tangent.
Well, I was in a sunglass shop the other day, and my wife was with me, and we're looking through the Oakleys, and I said, "Hey, look at this photo. These are 1985. I got a pair of these from Phil." Him and Le Mans were nearly the only guys wearing them then. Yeah. And Phil gave me a pair as well, so I had a pair of Oakley pilots. And it was fantastic, you know. It was a different era.
We called it pioneering days of Australian cycling, and in product development it was too, I guess.
Yeah. So, and the Americans have been very avant-garde in that. You know, Le Mans was the first one who brought, you know, triathlon bars, Oakley glasses. You know, he brought a lot of stuff in the way that, you know, Lance did in his era. So I was lucky enough to be around Phil and Greg in those early days of my career.
When you look back at your riding days, I know, for example, there was a top 10 in the Worlds in 1988 in Rons, is that right?
Yep.
That's one that I can, you know, remember because I was an impressionable teenager. But which riding moment is the one that stands out for you from your racing days?
There's two, and they're for two different reasons. One was Milan-San Remo. I'd had little fantasies as boys do about grandeur, and one of my fantasies was leading out my team leader Eric van der Aarden on the Via Roma to Milan-San Remo finish. In 1987 I was in the breakaway from the start. We're away the whole race. No team car came up because there's only one team car, no radios, 2 feed zones, no bidons in the final. You know, you're running out of food. I've attacked before the suppressor, got away alone. Switzer Eric Mackler caught me there. We rode together between the suppressor and the Poggio. He dropped me on the Poggio and went away to win. Held the bunch at bay, and my teammate Eric van der Aarden finished second at 6 seconds. And we never mentioned it after that, me and Eric, but it was, I did realise without me attacking, he probably would have won the race. And that would have been a milestone for, you know, my little fantasy about, you know, my moment of grandeur. But I felt like, you know, that's bike racing as well. But there was one thing that stuck out in my mind as well. The other thing was the Worlds you mentioned in 1988. Funny you mentioned that, Rob, because I was at the Tour of Burgos in August, and I met Neil Stevens before the start. You know, he pulled up in the Orica Green Edge car next to me, and we were, you know, chatting. He said, "I just wanted to tell you something. You know, remember we rode those Worlds in 1988, and you asked me to come up and ride for you at Worlds, and you put me up, and, you know, told me what you wanted to do." And he said, "For riding from you at Worlds, then it formed me as a bike rider and as a director later of how teamwork goes." And for me, it was an epic example of how you can rise above your own capabilities with the right focus. You know, I wasn't one of the greatest bike riders, but when I put my mind fully on something, I could rise above my own capabilities. And I think in Ronsa I did that. You know, Steve-O rode for me, and what we'd said before the start is I would fall asleep in his wheel from the start. He would pick up my feed bags, he would ride the race, and I would just follow him. Always in the wind, not thinking, not using energy. Steve-O took the last feed bag, I think at four laps to go, and rode for a lap and a half with the feed bag around his neck. And I went away in the final with 10 of us, I think, Last time up the climb, quickly on attack, big ring, and when he went past, I knew there was no getting on. Fondriest went after him over the top of the cross, got onto Crick, and they rode away. And behind for the next, 10 kilometres, Fignon, Bauer, myself, Gaillon, and there was a couple of others were all tacking, trying to get away. Bauer eventually got away, rode across to the front too. History makes it that quickly on crashed, Bauer got disqualified, Fondriest won. I attacked at a K to go from the group behind and was in medal contention till 75 metres to go, and just the road kicked up a little bit, last little bit, legs cut off. The other 7 riders came back past me and I finished 10th, But, 10th was still a great ride, and I really commiserated missing that medal. Having a world road medal for me would have been the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Some of those things get away from me. I got dropped in the final of Milan-San Remo. I got caught in the championship of Zurich, 100 metres to go. Stuff happens,
Yeah.
But I think that was probably the race, that Worlds 1988, where everything led up to it. I was 4th in the Tour of Denmark, 2nd in the Tour of Belgium, 10th in Zurich, championship of Zurich the week before, just caught before the finish, and I was really at the peak. It was on my home terrain in Belgium and ready to go. So.
It's 28 years ago, Rons, and it's weird that we're talking about it now. It's not really weird, but your recall is pretty impressive. Does it get boring talking about the glory days?
I think I like talking about, or reflecting, let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not making comparisons with now and then,
No.
because as I mentioned Brick Scotta before, 30 years later, I met Jacques Anquetil, I've met Brick Scotta, I've met Eddie Merckx, I've met all of these stars that kids now can only read about in a really old book, who've probably never heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of span a few generations, and the stories that I've heard about, from the 40s or the 50s or the 60s, were sort of nostalgia to me, and looking back at my own career, is pretty interesting, in 1985 we had a 350 kilometre stage in the Tour. Which is different. We had a 75 kilometre individual time trial, which like compared to cycling now is completely different. 1985 I finished last in the Tour of Flanders. I was 24th. There was 240 finishers. 240 starters. The weather was so abysmal, but 24 of us finished, And those are sort of things you look back on. I did the Gavia stage in '89 when Hampson won the Giro,
Yeah.
and those are things you don't forget. They're sort of etched in your mind, and you don't remember them fondly, but they're sort of a part of your history, aren't they?
It doesn't have to be fun to be fun, or memorable.
No, but the memorable things in cycling always are something like that, aren't they? When Hinault won Liège by 10 minutes and only 14 riders finished or something. Or when Merckx, won his first tour, and there are things in cycling that sort of stand out as icons of cycling through the generations.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? We've talked, let's say, over 20 minutes, and we haven't talked about all of the ugly bits of pro cycling. We can hark back to times when we know that doping existed, and we know that different things were, there was collusion and all sorts of stuff that likes to hit the headlines these days. But we've had a good discussion without even having to look back at any nastiness of it. When you see things like the TUE that's come up in recent times through the hacking and the use and abuse of cortisone by Wiggins, for example, how do you feel as someone involved with the sport? What emotions does that kind of news conjure with you?
I grew up in a generation where we didn't blame or make comparisons. I'm employed by BMC Racing Team to get the best out of the sporting side of the team with the athletes that we've got. It does disturb me that we stay focused on this negativity all the time. And okay, the truth is the truth if it's really the truth. Cycling's made such a dynamic change in the last 15 years, 10 years say, to where we are now, and yet these things keep getting dredged up consistently before the big events. You know, a lot of teams are struggling for sponsorship, and we're trying to bring in corporate entities that will take cycling into the next generations and make it a strong sport. And yet we're still focused on half-truths. You know, the first real bike ride I ever saw, you know, in country Victoria on a track was his father, Gary Wiggins, on the Warragul track in like 1973. And I met Gary, you know, in Belgium when I was there, and so that affinity with Bradley, you know, even though I don't know him, sort of came from his father. So I've watched him closely. And
I mean, I didn't mean to bring it up just because we hadn't spoken about it, but it's just so much part of our sport is that we tend to.
Unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately. It's a wonderful sport we've got, and the sport needs to go in the right direction. It needs to be developed. We're falling behind the major sports. I think, you know, the next steps are going to define the future of the sport. I meet a couple of times a year, and my ideas have changed a little bit, probably, you know, in the last 12 months, 2 years. I like to look after myself because I like to feel good. I like to ride my bike. I like to be fit. And the reason I became vegetarian is because, you know, I had hepatitis when I was 20, came back from Europe, had a struggle to get fit again. My trainer, Peter Brotherton, was very much into health foods and taught me a lot about, in the words that he put it, how to look after myself. Growing sprouts, you know, grinding up grains, eating nuts, eating fresh fruit and vegetables, and I got healthy again and went back to Europe and turned pro. And he said, you need to eat meat because you need that, but I just never felt right eating meat after that. I think that was detrimental to my cycling career.
How long did you race as a vegetarian?
My whole career, 10 years, yeah. And I think that was the thing that took away depth in the big races that I didn't have. Probably I was protein deficient most of my cycling career. If you see how many calories you use, and if you're not getting the right protein in, and as much as the books say, you know, cheese and nuts and all the rest of it can fill that in, if you're using, you know, as much as a pro cyclist does on a big mountain stage, there's no way you can replace that protein. You need it from a high quality source, and that's meat. Right. So the other thing is, you know, I've got older. I've seen a little bit differently. I've been confronted with my own health issues in the last couple of years that have sort of made me wonder what it's all about, you know, and how strictly we need to live our lives, and what the purpose of it is.
You still look incredibly fit. I don't know if it's on the record, but I'll ask. We know you've had a cancer incident. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that, or
No, I think that's fine. It is sort of pertinent to my own personal state. You know, I had prostate cancer, diagnosed 2 years ago, and I had a prostatectomy at the start of last year, 2015, and I had another operation start this year to remove some lymph glands. I'd had a heightened PSA probably since 2009 or 2010, which wasn't really telling, but 2 years ago went very fast and got a little bit out of control, and anyway, I think I made the right decisions to get the treatment I had. Fortunately, I was saved from chemo and radiation, and only 2 weeks ago I got the all clear that my PSA is nearly zero. We still need to control it, but I think that has brought a different perspective to my mindset about what's important, and given me just a little bit more clarity on life itself.
I was talking to your wife just before we went on the record, and she says every now and again she needs to remind you, Allan, it's just a bike race. Is that something that you sort of, slap yourself across the face and tell yourself once in a while? Do you remind yourself it is just bike racing?
I try to put it into perspective, but with my experiences from the last couple of years dealing with that cancer, and coming out the other side of it, as it were, I've realised that life is about the passion you have. My passion is cycling.
Mm-hmm.
Being stressed about things is one thing, being passionate about it is another. And I love it when we win. I'm upset when we lose. But that's part of bike racing, that's part of the competition, that's part of my job. And I understand what my wife says, it's only a bike race, and it is only a bike race. But in our world, that's the important thing, that's the really important thing. That's why we do it, because we want to be successful,
Yeah. Just to conclude, I'm looking at you and I would say that you're still on the bike. At least that's how your aesthetic presents. Are you riding, and what do you get out of it if you are on the bike these days?
I had, after the operation, I had a few months off the bike. It took me some time to get back on the bike and refining some form. Sitting on the saddle was a little bit difficult for the first period, and slowly building up my form. And I was a little bit despondent that I'd got so unfit and unhealthy, and I wanted to get fit again. And my wife came up with a great suggestion of, why don't you just do it consistently instead of leaving at for the office at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. Why don't you get on your bike at 6 o'clock in the morning and just ride for an hour? You don't need to ride for 3 hours, but ride for an hour and do it consistently. And actually, with all the trainers around me, she gave me the best advice, because I started that way and started riding 45 minutes to an hour, and I have an hour circuit that I ride around. And I slowly built up my condition again, and that's actually what it's turned out to be, my hour run where I just de-stress. I can go full gas for an hour. On a Saturday I might ride a bit further, 2 or 3 hours, but I think I've learned to enjoy riding my bike more, and I'm not feeling pressured to go and do long rides and be as fit as or whatever, but I do like the feeling of being able to ride fast. And that endorphin rush that you get after doing a good ride. So I think that keeps you in touch with the riders and the racing as well, And also, if you never suffer on a climb anymore, how can you understand what the rider's going through in the bike race?
Okay. As always, it's a pleasure having a chat. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks.
Cheers, Allan.
Cheers, Rob.